Cops' lies fall apart in court as a black woman reveals her position in a U.S. intelligence agency. A hush fell over the packed courtroom. Spectators held their breath as they watched the fierce gaze of Sarah Thompson, a poised black woman in an impeccably tailored suit, face down the police officer who had accused her of a crime she swore she did not commit. The officer's confident smirk wavered as Sarah's words sliced through the silence, exposing discrepancies in his testimony. She had endured weeks of public scorn and blatant injustice. But as Sarah took a slow, measured step forward to reveal her true identity, a proud member of a top U.S. intelligence agency, the stunned crowd knew the tide had turned. Sarah Thompson's life had changed in the blink of an eye. On a warm Friday evening in June, the familiar hum of late-night traffic punctuated the air as she walked home from her best friend, Beth's, birthday dinner in downtown Atlanta. It had been a night of laughter, dancing, and catching up, and Sarah's cheeks still felt warm from the intense conversation and a cocktail or two. The city lights shimmered against the Georgia skyline, reflecting a gentle glow on Sarah's freshly twisted braids. She clutched her purse close to her side, feeling the weight of her phone within. There, she had text messages from her fiancé, David, who was away on a business trip. If everything went smoothly, she would be home, safe and sound, in 20 minutes. The scuffle of footsteps behind her made her turn. A patrol car cruised down the empty stretch of road, its headlights illuminating the street in short bursts. Another block or two, and Sarah would be in front of her apartment complex's secure entrance. Then, the siren hooped, a sharp reminder of authority cutting through the night. She froze, heart pounding, watching as the police vehicle pulled over to the curb. A white officer, tall and broad-shouldered, stepped out. His face was set in an unreadable mask. Sarah had done nothing wrong, so confusion and a faint spike of anxiety took hold. "Ma'am," he said, voice taut, "stop right there." It was a command more than a request, and Sarah's instincts flared. Something about his tone set her on edge. She had grown accustomed to trusting her intuition over the years. Still, Sarah complied, turning fully to face him, with her hands raised slightly in a non-threatening gesture. "What's going on, officer?" she asked, striving to keep her voice level. His nameplate read Officer Baker. He walked a slow circle around her, shining his flashlight without a shred of courtesy, making Sarah squint. "We got a report of a woman matching your description causing trouble in this neighborhood," he said, face impassive. Sarah's jaw tightened. She pressed her lips together, forcing herself to remain calm. "Trouble? I'm just walking home. You might have the wrong person." Officer Baker shifted on his feet, looking Sarah up and down like he was waiting for her to do something incriminating. "I'm going to need to see some ID," he insisted. Sarah complied, reaching into her bag slowly. She had no intention of making any sudden moves, especially given how the officer seemed keyed up. She handed him her driver's license, noticing a faint scowl deepen across his features. He pulled out his own phone and stepped aside. Sarah glanced around. There were no witnesses, no other pedestrians in sight. Something about the scene felt unnaturally tense. The moment Officer Baker returned, Sarah recognized the shift. His lips curved into a self-satisfied smirk. "Ma'am," he drawled, "I need to ask you a few questions about a break-in reported in this vicinity earlier." Sarah's pulse sped up. A break-in? She had been at the restaurant all night with friends who could vouch for her, and yet she sensed he had already made up his mind about her guilt. "Officer, I was celebrating my friend's birthday downtown. I just got out of an Uber 2 blocks from here because the traffic was a mess. Please, you can call Beth or check with the restaurant. I have receipts," Sarah explained, her voice laced with urgency. Officer Baker cocked his head, eyes scrutinizing Sarah's every gesture. "People can craft alibis, you know," he said. "I've got probable cause here. You fit the description. Hand over your purse, please." Anxiety surged through Sarah. Her instincts screamed that she was being profiled, but Sarah was no ordinary bystander. She had extensive training, though not something she could easily reveal to an officer, not yet anyway. Reluctantly, she unzipped her bag, handed it over, and watched Officer Baker rummage through it. He pulled out her phone, her keys, a lipstick, a small wallet, slowly, like he expected to find contraband. He ran his flashlight into every pocket and seam. Nothing. His smirk faltered, but instead of letting her go, he seemed annoyed he hadn't found evidence that might incriminate her. Sarah felt dread coil in her stomach. This was more than mistaken identity. Something about the officer's posture suggested a personal agenda. "Looks clean," he said at last, though it pained him to admit it. "Still, I need you to come down to the station to give a statement." Sarah's mind raced. She had done nothing wrong. She knew her rights, and she also knew what typically happened when you ended up in a small interrogation room with no advocate. She spoke calmly. "Am I under arrest?" "You're being detained for questioning," he answered evasively. "I'm not sure yet if I have enough to charge you." Sarah's breath came shallow. She silently prayed that logic would prevail, that reason would surface in this officer's mind. But his stoic expression only grew more stony as he reached for a pair of handcuffs. Sarah felt her heart pounding in her ears. When the metal closed around her wrists, she couldn't suppress a tremor of fear. She'd never been on this side of the law. She had vowed to serve and protect the country in ways most civilians would never know. Yet here she was, a single black woman in the dark, cuffed in front of an officer who gave every indication he was more than ready to see her behind bars. She was placed in the back of the patrol car, the dank smell of rubber and stale sweat invading her senses as the engine roared to life, and they pulled away. Sarah stared out the window, her thoughts whirling. If this man had decided she was a scapegoat, her only hope lay in the truth she held close, her real identity, yet she knew it would be a last resort to reveal it. Protocol demanded secrecy, even if her life was about to spiral out of control. Word of Sarah Thompson's arrest spread quickly through her circle of friends. Beth, who had been the last to see Sarah at the birthday celebration, was frantic. When Sarah never arrived home, she began calling Sarah's phone, only to receive no answer. David, Sarah's fiancé, was already en route from his work trip in Chicago the moment he heard the news. He began trying to reach Sarah. Meanwhile, Sarah sat in a small interrogation room at the precinct. The fluorescent lights above buzzed, casting a dull, yellowish glow. Officer Baker stood outside in the hallway, discussing Sarah's case with another officer. Sarah could hear snippets of conversation through the flimsy door. Phrases like probable cause, resisting, and typical suspect. She tightened her fingers around the edge of the table to keep her composure. A short time later, a detective with salt and pepper hair and dark circles under his eyes entered. He carried a file in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. His name tag read Detective Lewis. He offered Sarah a curt nod and sat across from her, studying her. He seemed more tired than aggressive. "Miss Thompson," Detective Lewis began, "I understand you were stopped by Officer Baker in connection to a break-in in this neighborhood. The homeowner reported seeing a woman leaving the scene. We have limited witness testimony." Sarah breathed in slowly. She had nothing to hide, but was wary about revealing too much. "I've got an alibi, Detective. I was at a birthday party downtown for most of the evening. I can provide the names of my friends, and the restaurant can verify my presence via receipts and security footage. I'm innocent." Detective Lewis sipped his coffee, then set it aside. His expression was neutral, though Sarah sensed a flicker of sympathy behind his eyes. "That's what we're trying to figure out," he said. "Officer Baker claims you matched the description perfectly and that you behaved suspiciously when approached." A prick of anger rose in Sarah. "I only asked if I was under arrest or not. There's nothing suspicious about knowing my rights." Detective Lewis flipped through a few pages in his folder. Sarah could see that the contents included a grainy photo of a woman in a dark hoodie and a brief, typed summary of the break-in. The homeowner described a woman around 5 feet 7 inches to 5 feet 10 inches, with braids. "Pretty vague, if you ask me," he admitted, "and you're not wearing a hoodie or carrying any stolen property. So far, the evidence is circumstantial at best." Sarah nodded, relief fluttering within her, but she knew better than to relax entirely. Officer Baker's personal determination to pin this on her might still cause trouble. "You can hold me," Sarah continued carefully, mustering a neutral tone, "but it won't change the fact that I was somewhere else entirely. And if you check the security footage from the downtown restaurant, you'll confirm that." Detective Lewis studied her face for a moment, as though weighing the sincerity in her eyes. "Okay," he said finally. "Let's get that footage, talk to your friends, and see what we can confirm." He rose to his feet. Sarah observed that although Lewis was doing his job, something about this entire situation felt off. The tension in the precinct was thicker than usual, as though Sarah's presence was stirring a deeper issue. She saw Officer Baker through the interrogation room window, arms folded, glaring. She had no idea what personal vendetta he might hold, but Sarah was certain that this was about more than a simple break-in. After waiting another hour, Sarah was informed, somewhat begrudgingly, that they would let her go if her alibi checked out. She was told to stay within city limits, that she might be called back for more questions. As Sarah was released from the holding cell, Beth was there, waiting for her in the lobby, tears in her eyes. They hugged tightly, Sarah fighting the urge to collapse under the weight of the injustice she had just faced. "Girl, let's get you home," Beth whispered. "I'm so sorry." Sarah nodded, exhaustion radiating through her limbs. She was beyond grateful for Beth's presence, yet her mind replayed everything that had happened. The abrupt stop, the targeting glint in Officer Baker's eyes, the humiliating handcuffing, the hours in the precinct. Officer Baker's hostility still crackled in her memory. Sarah vowed to keep an eye on him. Walking out of the station, Sarah looked up at the neon sign that read Atlanta Police Department, Zone 5. It glowed in the darkness like a reminder of the night's events. She had her freedom for now, but she also had a new mission. She wanted the truth to come to light, not only for herself, but for the countless others whose stories never made it out of the interrogation room. Sarah Thompson's path to that claustrophobic interrogation room hadn't been typical. A proud graduate of Howard University, Sarah had studied criminology and computer science, driven by an unwavering sense of justice. She had applied to multiple agencies, eventually completing an exhaustive and highly confidential process to land a position in a specialized division of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. Early in her career, Sarah had shown an astonishing aptitude for intelligence analysis and undercover work. She moved seamlessly between roles, each time proving her worth in scenarios that demanded quick thinking, emotional resilience, and a talent for blending in. Yet, Sarah never paraded her FBI credentials in front of anyone. Secrecy was part of her job. In her personal life, she told friends and family she worked as a consultant in data security. David was aware that Sarah did something more sensitive. He had gleaned as much from her irregular hours and hush-hush phone calls, but she kept official details strictly under wraps. The only official marker of her job was a single black-and-white photo pinned in her locked desk drawer at home. Sarah standing in front of the main entrance to the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. The memory of her training days filled her with pride and the sense of duty that had guided her life choices ever since. When Sarah had been forced into that squad car, a tempest of conflicting ideas had raged within her. Part of her wanted to flash her badge, present her credentials, and immediately put this obviously power-tripping officer in his place. But Sarah was painfully aware of the hush-hush protocols around her identity. Officers in local police departments generally were not privy to her specialized role. Additionally, she had learned that revealing her FBI status too soon could compromise ongoing investigations. Every instinct in her told her to wait, to handle this by the book, and allow the local system to do its job, unless it became absolutely necessary to unmask herself. Back in her apartment the next morning, Sarah woke to the sound of her phone buzzing repeatedly. She had missed calls and voicemails from David. She quickly called him back. "Baby, are you okay?" His voice came through, urgent and anxious. "I got in late last night and went straight to your place, but you were already asleep." Sarah sighed, half in relief. "I'm fine now. It was a mess at the station." She briefly summarized the encounter, her voice tight with lingering anger and hurt. David's tone turned steely. "I can't believe they did that to you. And that officer, he has no clue who he's dealing with." Sarah closed her eyes. She understood David's frustration. He knew enough about her real job to know she wasn't some easy target, but Sarah also recognized that revealing her identity prematurely could escalate tensions. She wanted the truth to come out in a more official setting, if it ever did. "I'm meeting with an attorney this afternoon," Sarah said. "I need to be proactive. If they decide to charge me, even without real evidence, I need legal representation. I also want to file a complaint about the arrest. There was no reason for Baker to drag me in." David agreed, promising to accompany her. Before ending the call, he reminded her they were a team. Sarah felt a surge of warmth. On days like these, his unwavering support was a lifeline. That afternoon, Sarah and David drove together to a local law office. The attorney, Lisa Forte, had been recommended by one of Sarah's sorority sisters. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman with a stern expression and a talent for spotting holes in a prosecution's argument. As they sat around a polished oak table, Sarah recounted everything from start to finish. Lisa nodded occasionally, jotting down notes. You were never read your Miranda rights? Lisa asked, pressing her pen firmly to the page. Sarah shook her head. No. Baker just put the cuffs on me and said I was being taken in for questioning. He never told me I had the right to remain silent. Lisa exchanged a look with Sarah that seemed to confirm the seriousness of the breach. I'll look into that. For now, Mrs. Thompson, rest assured, there's not enough evidence here for any legitimate charge. If the police keep pushing, we'll request a formal hearing. A knot in Sarah's chest loosened. She flashed Lisa a grateful smile. Thank you. The worst part is, I know there are people who go through this and don't have the resources or support. It's not right. Lisa patted Sarah's hand. One step at a time. Let's get you squared away first, then see what else we can do. As they left, Sarah couldn't shake the sense that Officer Baker's unwavering certainty about her guilt was a ticking time bomb. On the drive home, David navigated Atlanta's busy streets while Sarah stared out the window, her mind drifting to the locked drawer in her bedroom. Inside was her black leather credential case, her official proof that she was an agent in a specialized unit of the FBI. She had never expected to use it to defend herself against a local cop's bigotry or corruption, but each new turn of events suggested that if cornered, Sarah would have to do precisely that. Days turned into a week, and Sarah tried her best to resume a semblance of normalcy. She returned to her day-to-day obligations, carefully avoiding talk of her predicament with coworkers and acquaintances. The humiliating arrest had not made local headlines. Atlanta was a big city, and Sarah's story was just one among countless incidents. Still, word spread through Sarah's circle. Friends, outraged, offered support or posted about it online, urging people to stand up against racial profiling. Sarah's phone buzzed frequently with messages of solidarity. Her family, however, had been left largely in the dark. Sarah's mother, living in a small town just outside Birmingham, Alabama, would worry herself sick if she knew the full scope. For now, Sarah kept the details vague. She didn't want to add to her mother's concerns, especially when Sarah believed the matter would be resolved soon. Then, one afternoon, Sarah's world tilted again. She was exiting her apartment building, heading to an appointment with Lisa, when she spotted a police cruiser across the street. A chill traced up her spine. Officer Baker, perched in the driver's seat, had his eyes fixed on her. The moment Sarah looked at him, he spoke into his radio and pulled away. Sarah watched the vehicle vanish around a corner, her pulse pounding. Was he stalking her, trying to intimidate her? The brazen act infuriated her, but she clung to her resolve. She was not about to be frightened into hiding. At Lisa's office, Sarah recounted the incident. Lisa's brow furrowed. That's harassment, she declared. If it happens again, document it. Date, time, place. Keep a record. We'll use it if we have to escalate the complaint. The tension only grew when Sarah met with Detective Lewis the following day. He had asked her to come in to finalize her statement, promising it was just a formality. I reviewed the footage from that restaurant, Lewis said, leaning back in his chair. It confirms you were there for most of the evening. You clearly had no time to commit this crime. Sarah exhaled, a wave of relief washing over her. Does that mean I'm cleared? Lewis pursed his lips. As far as I'm concerned, the break-in case won't be pinned on you. Officer Baker, however, is claiming you resisted arrest. He's filed a separate report stating that you acted in a disorderly manner, used abusive language, and threatened him. Sarah's mouth fell open. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. That's a lie, she said firmly. I was never disorderly. I asked him if I was under arrest, that's all. I did not threaten him. There should be body cam footage to disprove this. Detective Lewis nodded. I've requested the footage, but it's missing. A wave of nausea rolled through Sarah. Missing body cam footage? That was convenient for Officer Baker. She felt her hands clench into fists. Anger and helplessness wet inside her. Look, Lewis added, I don't like this any more than you do. Internal affairs might get involved if we keep pushing. I'm telling you this off the record. Baker has had complaints against him in the past. He's got a clean record on paper, but there's chatter that not all of his body cam videos make it into evidence. Sarah's jaw tightened. This was bigger than a single arrest. She felt the gravity of a system that enabled officers like Baker to falsify reports and get away with it. She thought of all the faces she had seen flash across news screens. Black men and women wrongfully arrested, or worse. That night in the squad car, Sarah had felt a fraction of that terror, and she realized she was in a position to do something about it. Stepping out of the precinct, Sarah tried to calm the fury in her chest. The possibility of a false charge for resisting arrest would have major implications on her life, personally, professionally, and financially. She could not allow that narrative to go unchallenged. When Sarah got home, she shut the door, locked it, and opened that drawer. The credential case lay there, cold and silent. She picked it up, thumbed over the raised gold letters, Federal Bureau of Investigation. A reflection in the polished leather stared back at her, resolute, perhaps a bit frightened, but unwilling to bend. Sarah decided then and there that if Officer Baker insisted on lying, she would reveal her hand. She had followed the rules, maintained her cover, but now she was cornered. She was not just fighting for herself, but for the unprotected folks in her community who had no such badge in their drawers. 3 days later, Sarah received an unexpected phone call from Lisa. "Sarah, it appears that the district attorney's office is considering pressing the resisting arrest charge against you," citing Baker's report. Sarah felt her stomach drop. "Lisa, this is insane. I have no criminal record, and I didn't resist anything. Where is the logic?" Lisa's tone was grim. "Officer Baker is claiming that you tried to flee and nearly knocked him over in the process. There's no body cam footage to contradict him, so it's his word against yours." Sarah's mind swirled. She needed to bring out the big guns. "Lisa, I might have a way to fight this, but it involves sensitive information about my background. I wasn't sure if I should mention this before, but I'm not just a consultant. I'm with the FBI." A pause crackled through the line. "What?" Lisa exclaimed. "You. Please keep your voice down," Sarah advised, even though Lisa was the only one in her office. "I'm not part of a routine department. It's specialized, but yes, I'm a federal agent." Lisa let out a low whistle. "Sarah, that changes things. If we can show that you have a deep knowledge of law enforcement procedures, it directly contradicts the idea that you'd resist. You would know the best course of action is to remain calm and comply, unless this was an ambush. Still, we'll need to be careful about how we use this information. It could be beneficial, or it could stir up bigger issues, especially if the local PD thinks the feds are stepping on their toes." Sarah knew that was a risk. "It's a last resort, Lisa, but I'm prepared if it comes to that. Right now, I want to gather any evidence we can to fight this charge using normal channels. If that fails, we'll reveal my credentials." Lisa agreed, and they ended the call with a plan to keep investigating. Sarah shut her eyes, leaning against the wall for support. This was happening too fast. Every step felt like a plunge into deeper waters. Over the following week, Sarah and Lisa combed through any possible witnesses. Beth, David, and Sarah's friend who had dropped her off a few blocks from home offered to testify about Sarah's calm demeanor that evening. The restaurant staff also confirmed Sarah's good spirits and that she left without incident. However, none of them were on the street during the arrest. Sarah felt the walls closing in. Officer Baker's false testimony, coupled with the missing body cam footage, made Sarah's innocence precarious. Then, on a humid Tuesday morning, Sarah was summoned for her first court hearing. She arrived with Lisa by her side. The courtroom was modest. Rows of wooden benches, fluorescent lights overhead. The judge's bench elevated at the front. Sarah's heart pounded as she saw Officer Baker seated with the prosecution. His smug grin made her skin crawl. He shot Sarah a quick glance, as though triumphant in his belief he was about to secure a victory. The hearing commenced. The prosecution laid out the charge of resisting arrest and disturbing the peace. Sarah clung to her composure as the prosecutor spoke of Sarah's supposed flight from the officer and her alleged belligerence. Lisa then presented Sarah's side, a woman with a clean record, an upstanding member of the community, a professional with no reason to resist. Lisa requested the body cam footage. The prosecutor replied that it was unavailable due to a technical malfunction. Sarah's fists clenched beneath the table. The judge, a middle-aged man with a stern face, seemed conflicted. "Without the body cam footage, we have only statements and circumstantial evidence. Miss Thompson's alibi for the break-in is solid, so we're not discussing that. This is purely a matter of her conduct during the stop." Lisa interjected, her voice firm. "Your Honor, I believe there are inconsistencies in Officer Baker's report. My client did not resist arrest. We suspect the body cam footage would confirm that, if it hadn't conveniently disappeared." The prosecution objected to the notion of calling it a convenience, leading to a tense back and forth. Meanwhile, Sarah observed Officer Baker's posture, smug, relaxed, like a cat that had trapped its prey. She felt her anger flicker dangerously, but a calm overshadowed her too, because she knew something none of them did. She had an ace up her sleeve. The judge, after weighing the arguments, decided the case would proceed to trial if the DA's office felt it had enough evidence. Sarah's stomach churned. She could face a trial over something she had not done. The entire system could turn her life upside down. She felt David's reassuring hand on her shoulder. She straightened, meeting Baker's gaze with quiet defiance. Let him enjoy his moment. He had no idea of the storm that was about to come his way. 2 days after the preliminary hearing, Sarah received an unlikely phone call from an unfamiliar number. When she answered, a shaky male voice spoke up, identifying himself as Ryan Miller, an officer who occasionally partnered with Baker. "I got your number from a mutual acquaintance," he said nervously. I need to talk to you, Miss Thompson, but not on the record." Sarah's curiosity piqued. She arranged to meet him at a quiet diner on the outskirts of the city, away from prying eyes. David insisted on accompanying her for safety. That evening, they found Ryan sitting in a booth with a half-drunk cup of coffee. He had a jittery energy, glancing around as though expecting to see Baker at any moment. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, voice low. "I've been on the force 5 years. I've seen Baker do some questionable things, but I never had proof, never found the courage to speak out. But this time, it's gone too far." Sarah nodded, leaning forward. "I'm listening." Ryan took a long breath. "Baker is lying about you. That night, he told me he had a tip about suspicious activity in the neighborhood, but no calls actually came through dispatch. I didn't think much of it at the time, but later I realized the story didn't add up. He specifically drove out there hoping to pick up somebody he could pin the break-in on." David's jaw clenched. "So he was hunting for a scapegoat?" Ryan squirmed, guilt etched in his features. "He's been known to target black folks walking alone at night in that area. I didn't realize how far he'd go until I saw how determined he was to follow through with the false statements. He wouldn't let up about how you tried to run, how you supposedly yelled at him. But, Miss Thompson, I saw the dash cam footage briefly, before it was lost. You never resisted. You stood there calmly the whole time." Sarah's heart leapt. "Dash cam footage? So it existed?" Ryan nodded. "Yes, it did. I think Baker destroyed it, or had someone do it for him. That's a serious offense. But the problem is, I don't have a copy. I don't know if anyone else does. But if I'm called to testify, I can say what I saw." Sarah was torn between relief and frustration. "Thank you," she said quietly. "This could be a game changer, but you might face backlash from within the department if you blow the whistle." Ryan's eyes dropped. "Yeah, I know. I've been wrestling with this for days, but I can't in good conscience let an innocent person be framed." Sarah gently placed a hand on Ryan's. "I appreciate your courage. Just be careful." After exchanging contact information, Sarah and David left, both stunned by the revelation. A sliver of hope flickered in Sarah. Baker's carefully orchestrated lie had cracks in it, and with Ryan's testimony, Sarah might be able to shatter the entire false narrative. That night, Sarah spoke with Lisa, who was thrilled to hear the news. "This is exactly the witness we need," Lisa said. "If this goes to trial and Ryan is willing to testify, the prosecution's case will collapse. They'll be forced to drop the charges or risk a very public embarrassment." A hint of relief washed over Sarah, though she remained guarded. Baker was clearly the type to do whatever it took to protect himself, even if that meant silencing potential witnesses. Sarah prayed that Ryan would stay safe until the trial. Time crept forward. Another week passed, and Sarah started to see small signs that her ordeal might be nearing an end. Detective Lewis became more open in acknowledging Sarah's innocence. The district attorney's office seemed increasingly uncertain about going forward with the charges. Perhaps Lisa's relentless pressure and the possibility of a key witness, Ryan, had them rethinking. But Sarah's relief was short-lived. A friend in the department texted her one afternoon to say that new evidence had been found, incriminating Sarah. Photographs of a woman in Sarah's exact outfit on the night of the arrest, climbing over a fence near the site of the break-in. Sarah's friends suspected these photos were doctored, or at least wrongly attributed, as the timestamp seemed off. Sarah felt cold dread. Baker wasn't giving up, he was doubling down. That evening, Sarah sat on her couch, eyes glued to her phone screen, scrolling through the alleged new evidence. The woman in the blurry photo had braids, wore a similar jacket, but Sarah noted subtle discrepancies. The figure's body shape was different, and the date stamp in the corner looked altered. Sarah forwarded it all to Lisa, her mind burning with anger and fear. Baker was forging evidence now. Sarah realized she might have no choice but to play her trump card sooner rather than later. If the city was about to be dragged into a sensational trial, one that threatened Sarah's freedom, she would not go down quietly. For so long, she had kept her identity a secret to protect her mission and her agency. But there were times when the truth was more powerful than secrecy, and Sarah sensed that moment was upon her. 2 weeks later, Sarah arrived at the Fulton County Courthouse for what was expected to be a tense hearing. The DA had submitted these new photographs as evidence, seeking to bolster the case. Lisa planned to challenge their authenticity. The outcome of this hearing could decide whether Sarah's case would be dismissed or set for a full trial. Sarah wore a conservative black suit and walked into the courtroom with her head held high. David trailed close behind, offering silent support. When she took her seat at the defense table, she caught a glimpse of Officer Baker. He exuded smugness, arms folded, as he exchanged whispers with the prosecutor. Sarah suppressed the anger roiling within her. She had to remain calm. The hearing began. The prosecutor presented the new photos and argued that, combined with Baker's sworn statement, they showed Sarah in the vicinity of the break-in. Lisa pounced on the questionable timestamps and the physical inconsistencies. She demanded to know why these photos had surfaced so late in the case. The judge listened intently, expression revealing little. Then, Lisa announced, "Your Honor, the defense intends to introduce a piece of information about Miss Thompson that is crucial to determining her credibility and the plausibility of these allegations." The prosecutor objected, claiming irrelevance, but Lisa pressed on. Miss Thompson is not merely an average citizen. She has undergone extensive law enforcement training. She is, in fact, a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. A collective hush enveloped the room. Jaws dropped, and Officer Baker sat up straighter, eyes wide. Sarah felt the weight of dozens of stares. The judge peered over his glasses, lips parted in shock. Lisa continued, voice unwavering. "We have documentation from the FBI that confirms Miss Thompson's active status. She understands investigative procedures intimately and would know better than to resist arrest in such a blatant manner. Moreover, her training grants her the skill to recognize and document any misconduct. If Miss Thompson were truly at the scene of a crime, she would have had the knowledge to avoid detection entirely, assuming she had criminal intent, which she clearly does not." A wave of murmurs swept through the courtroom. Officer Baker's face visibly paled. The prosecutor seemed momentarily dumbstruck. Sarah, for her part, held her breath, mentally bracing for the avalanche of questions that would follow. The judge called for order. "This is highly unusual," he said, blinking in astonishment. "Miss Thompson, is it true you're an agent with the FBI?" Sarah stood, voice unwavering. "Yes, Your Honor. I've been with the Bureau for several years. I maintain a cover in my everyday life to protect ongoing investigations, but I can confirm I hold active credentials." She removed a slim folder from her briefcase and handed it to Lisa, who passed it to the judge. Inside were official documents verifying Sarah's employment, stamped with the FBI seal. The tension in the courtroom was almost palpable. The judge studied the documents, then raised his gaze to Sarah. This obviously cast the prosecution's case in a completely different light. The prosecutor tried to regain footing. "Your Honor, the fact that Miss Thompson is an FBI agent doesn't automatically clear her of wrongdoing. Even law enforcement officers can break the law." Lisa nodded. "We agree, which is why we rely on evidence. And in this case, the alleged evidence is compromised, contradictory, and suspiciously timed. Moreover, we intend to call Officer Miller to testify about the dash cam footage that was mysteriously lost." All eyes turned to Ryan Miller, who sat at the back, shoulders tense. He rose, took a trembling breath, and walked forward. After being sworn in, he proceeded to detail how he had seen the dash cam footage that showed Sarah calmly standing with her hands raised, offering no resistance. He elaborated on how Officer Baker had boasted about targeting Sarah and had taken steps to conceal the footage. The prosecutor's face contorted with frustration, but the momentum was clearly shifting away from them. The judge drummed his fingers on the bench. "It appears there is quite a bit of misconduct swirling around this case. I'm inclined to dismiss the charges against Miss Thompson on the grounds that the evidence is insufficient and likely fabricated. However, I want to give the prosecution a chance to respond." Caught off guard, the prosecutor stammered something about verifying Ryan's statements, but the judge had heard enough. For now, Miss Thompson is free of these charges. The court will not proceed with a trial that is built on questionable evidence and potential perjury. A thunderous silence reigned for half a moment. Then Sarah heard Beth, David, and others behind her release sighs of relief. Sarah felt something burning in her chest, vindication mixed with anger at the ordeal. Officer Baker stood abruptly, outraged. "Your Honor, if you allow criminals to..." The judge roared, slamming the gavel. "Officer Baker, another outburst from you, and I'll hold you in contempt." With that, Sarah's immediate nightmare ended, but she knew the saga wasn't truly over. Baker's lies had been exposed, at least in this context, and Sarah suspected there would be consequences for him, and maybe more revelations to come. Still, as Sarah stood, her hands trembled with a combination of relief and fury. She had been forced to unmask herself in a public courtroom just to secure her freedom, a small price perhaps, but it highlighted a system that often left ordinary citizens defenseless against authority figures who twisted the truth. In the hours following her dismissal, Sarah was bombarded by a whirlwind of reporters. News of an FBI agent being arrested by a local cop on false charges had leaked. Cameras flashed as Sarah and Lisa emerged from the courthouse. Microphones were thrust forward, and reporters asked pointed questions about Sarah's double life, about corruption in the police force, and about the significance of her race in the matter. Sarah made a brief statement. "I am grateful that justice has prevailed in my case. However, I stand here today not only for myself, but for all those who lack the platform or resources to challenge false accusations. I urge the public to remain vigilant, to question irregularities, and to stand against misconduct in law enforcement. The truth should be the foundation of every investigation, every arrest, and every trial." Meanwhile, Officer Baker was called into a private meeting with Internal Affairs. Sarah didn't know the details yet, but rumors spread that he was suspended, pending an inquiry into falsified evidence and tampering with bodycam footage. Sarah took no pleasure in the man's downfall, but she believed in accountability. Without it, rogue officers would continue to terrorize innocent people. Detective Lewis approached Sarah quietly in the courthouse corridor after the crowd dispersed. He met her gaze with a faint smile. "I had a hunch you were more than you appeared," he said, shaking his head. "I'm sorry this happened in my jurisdiction. We let you down." Sarah nodded. "Thank you for not jumping to conclusions," she replied. "At least you were open to evidence." Lewis lowered his voice. "I will want to talk to you. I suspect they'll mount an investigation, not just into Baker, but anyone else who might have conspired with him. This could get ugly." Sarah's eyebrows arched. She was more than prepared to cooperate, though she knew it might also attract scrutiny from her own agency. Any FBI agent involvement in local cases often brought political heat, but Sarah was determined to see it through. Later, Sarah, David, and Beth retreated to Beth's house for a celebratory dinner. The tension of the past few weeks still lingered, but the mood was triumphant. Beth offered a toast to Sarah for standing strong against injustice, and to new beginnings. Glasses clinked. Sarah savored the moment, though a part of her remained unsettled. She had revealed her FBI status, which meant a lot of questions from her community and even her mother, who had only known Sarah's vague cover story. The phone calls wouldn't stop anytime soon. David leaned over and kissed Sarah on the forehead. "You did it," he murmured. "I'm so proud of you." Sarah closed her eyes. "Thank you, but it's not over," she said quietly. "Baker is going to face an investigation, and I have a feeling I'll be called to testify again, this time against him. That's going to be another battle." David squeezed her hand. "We'll deal with it together." The next few weeks unspooled in a blur of interviews, statements, and hushed legal proceedings. Internal Affairs subpoenaed Sarah, Officer Ryan Miller, and even Detective Lewis to discuss the specifics of Baker's conduct. In each session, Sarah recounted the night of her arrest with measured precision, describing the fear, the profiling, and the lies. Ryan corroborated her account, verifying that the dash cam footage had shown Sarah's compliance. Baker, on the other hand, clung to his story. He claimed that Sarah had attacked him. When pressed about the missing footage, Baker claimed a technical glitch. However, the forensic techs were able to recover fragments from the squad car's device, enough to show Sarah standing calmly in front of Baker. The partial recovery stopped shortly before the audio abruptly cut out, raising serious suspicion that the footage had been deliberately tampered with. During one tense session, Sarah found herself face-to-face with Baker in a conference room at the department's IIA office. She sat across a long table, with two investigators at either end. Baker's eyes flicked with hostility. Sarah had faced criminals, terrorists, and far more dangerous individuals in her FBI work, but the personal nature of Baker's betrayal made this confrontation uniquely unsettling. "Officer Baker," one IIA investigator said calmly, "we have reason to believe the dash cam footage was purposely damaged. The timeline suggests you were the last person to handle the device. Care to explain?" Baker glared, refusing to meet Sarah's gaze. "I don't know anything about that. My job was to apprehend a suspect. She was the suspect. You had no basis to believe Miss Thompson was involved, correct?" Sarah interjected. Her voice was steady, though her hands balled into fists beneath the table. "She fit the description," he snapped, "and she was out walking alone at night. And that's all it took to justify an arrest and false claims of resistance." Sarah asked, voice rising slightly. "All because I looked like someone you claimed to be searching for? Or was it because I'm black and you needed a quick mark?" Baker slammed his hand on the table, rattling the metal surface. The IIA investigators intervened, calming the situation. Sarah forced herself to exhale slowly. She refused to be intimidated. When the session concluded, Sarah walked out with her head high, hearing Baker's muttered curses behind her. She knew it wasn't a guaranteed win yet. Internal affairs investigations could drag on, bogged down by procedural red tape, but the evidence was mounting against Baker. Sarah prayed for a swift outcome. As each day, more individuals, community organizers, activists, journalists clamored for justice. Sarah's story had become a lightning rod, underscoring systemic issues in local policing. At one point, Sarah received a call from an old friend at the FBI who worked in public relations. The friend cautioned her that the Bureau was supportive of her and condemning the wrongdoing, but they wanted Sarah to tread carefully when speaking publicly, so as not to overshadow official stances or compromise sensitive information. Sarah agreed. She understood the delicate balance between personal advocacy and agency protocol. Still, Sarah found herself more determined than ever to use her platform to advocate for reform. If someone like her, an FBI agent trained to handle high-stakes investigations, could be misrepresented and nearly framed, what about all the ordinary citizens who faced such injustice daily? The question gnawed at her. Sarah refused to let it go. A date was set for the internal hearing that would determine Baker's fate on the force. By then, public pressure had grown, with local media covering the story of the FBI agent arrested for walking while black. Civil rights groups rallied, demanding a thorough investigation into Baker's past cases. Sarah's phone rang nonstop with calls from activists seeking statements or interviews. She navigated each inquiry carefully, refusing to let the spectacle overshadow the main issue, accountability. On the morning of the hearing, Sarah arrived at the Police Administration Building in downtown Atlanta. The conference room was arranged much like a courtroom, with a panel of senior officers and a civilian oversight representative. Sarah and Lisa sat on one side, while Baker and his union representative sat on the other. Detective Lewis, Officer Miller, and additional witnesses filled the seats, prepared to testify. Over the course of 5 hours, evidence was presented, analyzed, and meticulously dissected. The partial dash cam footage was shown, revealing Sarah's compliant posture. Baker's contradictory statements were challenged, and Officer Miller recounted witnessing the original, unaltered footage before it vanished. Experts testified that the recording device had been tampered with, implicating someone familiar with the department's systems. Baker's defense tried to argue that Sarah's status as an FBI agent meant she had sophisticated methods to alter the timeline or manipulate data, but Lisa shut down that argument effectively, pointing out that Sarah had no incentive to stage such an elaborate frame job for a simple traffic stop. The panel members looked unimpressed by the defense's wild theories. As the hours wore on, it became clear that Baker's story was unraveling. His attempts to cast doubt on Sarah's credibility only highlighted how improbable his account was, in contrast to the mounting factual evidence. Sarah watched him squirm under questioning. She felt a swirl of conflicting emotions, rage for the turmoil he had caused her, and a measured satisfaction at seeing him forced to answer for his actions. Finally, in a heated exchange, one of the panel members turned to Baker and asked, "Officer Baker, can you provide any explanation, any at all, for how these missing sections of footage align with the timeline where Miss Thompson's compliance is evident. If your story is true, why would the recording vanish at the most critical moment? Baker gripped the edges of the table, sweat beading on his brow. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he mumbled, I can't explain it. It might have been a malfunction. But the panel member shook his head, unconvinced. A malfunction that conveniently protects your narrative and harms Miss Thompson's? That's quite the coincidence. An uneasy silence fell, broken only by the scratch of pens on notepads. Then the lead panel officer declared, "We will adjourn to deliberate." The room emptied. Everyone left to wait in the hallway. Sarah stood by David and Lisa, feeling the tension in every cell of her body. Baker's lies had collapsed under scrutiny. Now the question was whether the department would fully hold him accountable. Nearly an hour later, the panel reassembled. Sarah and the others filed back in, hearts pounding. The lead panel officer cleared his throat and read from a prepared statement. After reviewing all available evidence and testimony, we find that Officer Baker engaged in serious misconduct, including falsification of official documents, tampering with evidence, and providing false statements under oath. We recommend immediate termination of his employment with the Atlanta Police Department and the initiation of criminal charges for evidence tampering and perjury. A collective hush fell over the room. Baker's face contorted with a mix of fury and disbelief. He stood, glaring at Sarah, and began shouting. Security personnel quickly escorted him out. Sarah felt her chest tighten. She had expected him to face consequences, but hearing it declared so definitively brought tears to her eyes. The lead panel officer turned to Sarah. "Miss Thompson, on behalf of the department, we apologize for the distress this has caused you. We are grateful for your cooperation and regret that one of our own violated your rights. We hope to ensure such injustices are prevented in the future." It was a formal statement, but Sarah appreciated the sentiment. She nodded, her voice catching as she murmured, "Thank you." Outside, the world felt bigger and brighter. Reporters awaited news, but Sarah avoided the cameras this time. She and Lisa stepped aside to speak privately. "We did it," Lisa said, grasping Sarah's shoulders. "He's off the force, and he'll likely face charges. This is a victory, for sure." Sarah closed her eyes, relief washing over her like a cool wave. "Thank you, Lisa. I couldn't have done any of this without you." David joined them, smiling broadly. "Time to celebrate." A corner of Sarah's mouth lifted in a half-smile. "Yes, but after everything, I also want to keep pushing forward, to make sure real change happens." They walked away from the building, arm in arm, Sarah's heart racing with gratitude, triumph, and an unbreakable determination to fight for those who were still voiceless in a flawed system. In the weeks that followed, Sarah found her life in flux. She continued her assignments with the FBI, but she also took a more public stance against corruption and racial profiling, with the blessing of her superiors, who recognized the positive publicity her stance brought to an agency often viewed with skepticism. Sarah spoke at community forums and youth centers, sharing her story and advocating for justice reforms. Her mother, upon hearing the full truth, cried tears of both relief and pride. Sarah's extended family embraced her, rallying behind her mission. Her fiancé, David, continued to be her rock, supporting each new venture and reminding her to balance activism with self-care. Friends and strangers reached out, telling Sarah how her story had touched them, how it gave them hope in a world that often seemed tilted against them. Meanwhile, the Atlanta Police Department underwent a rigorous internal review. More officers came forward with stories of intimidation by Baker. The city's mayor announced the formation of a new oversight committee to handle misconduct allegations. Though Sarah knew one case couldn't fix all systemic issues, she felt a surge of optimism at seeing tangible steps toward reform. One late afternoon, Sarah sat at her kitchen table, drafting notes for an upcoming community lecture. She was due to speak at a local college about bridging the gap between law enforcement and marginalized communities. The desk phone rang, an internal line from the FBI. "Agent Thompson," she answered. Her supervisor's voice came through. "Good news. The brass was impressed with how you handled yourself, both in revealing your identity at the right time and in advocating for justice. There might be an opening in the Bureau's Civil Rights Division. Interested?" Sarah's pulse quickened. "Absolutely," she said. "That's my passion." "Expect a formal offer soon," her supervisor said. "We're proud of you." Sarah hung up, a grin stretching across her face. The events of the past months had been harrowing, but they had also led her to a new purpose. She would continue to serve her country, but now with an even more focused mission, protecting civil rights from within the system and ensuring that no one else was victimized by corrupted authority. As she wrote her speech, Sarah recalled the terrifying moment when Baker handcuffed her on that dark street. She remembered how her heart had pounded in fear and anger. Yet, through resilience, truth, and the courage of allies like Ryan Miller and Lisa Forte, justice had emerged triumphant. Sarah intended to carry that lesson forward, shining a light on wrongdoing wherever it lurked and reminding everyone that even in a flawed system, there was power in standing up for what was right. Sarah Thompson's journey, from a quiet, disciplined FBI agent to a public figure confronting corruption, proves that truth can indeed conquer lies. She faced humiliation, betrayal, and the threat of a criminal record, all because of a single cop's bias and deception. Yet, by trusting in her allies and ultimately revealing her position at the heart of U.S. intelligence, Sarah dismantled a web of falsehoods and inspired a city to demand real change. Now it's your turn to keep the momentum going. If Sarah's story touched you, if it renewed your faith that justice can prevail against all odds, please show your support. Like this video, share it with your community, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories that illuminate our collective fight for fairness and truth. Together, we stand stronger against injustice, shining a light where darkness lurks and forging a brighter tomorrow for everyone.